Let's talk about how to build a video game collection. Like seriously, it's pretty easy and can be done pretty cheap. So in this video, we will talk about how to build your video game collection, both cheap and with good games. And I've got kind of three main topics that I'm going to talk about to let you know kind of the best way to start a video game collection, because honestly, it can be daunting at times because there are so many games. Like seriously, this wall is full of games and I am always seeing more games and I'm like, man, that's a fun game. I want to play it. I want to buy it and play it and just put it on my shelf and have a bunch of fun with. Now, you can see these game collections that people post, and like I have behind me, of huge collections. And honestly, some people can afford to go out and just spend as much money as they can and get as much stuff as they can. Well, that's kind of not the way I went about it. But you could go out and buy full collections. Like some people that have amassed collections like to sell it like this. But that's not kind of how I like to do it, and not kind of the way I did it whenever I got everything. And I'm going to explain that a little bit, and then I will go into what I have for you guys on what you should do and the three main tips and tricks and ideas, topics that you should definitely take and use those when you're looking at starting a game collection. Now, I will say I have a ton of games behind me, but about 10 years ago, I didn't have this many games. I probably had, let's say 20 games, and those were my 20 games that were hardcore. I'm talking about Halos, stuff like that, Star Wars Battlefront, really heavy hitters, but I just didn't have a big collection. And that just kind of happened that way. It wasn't on purpose or anything. I kind of fell out of gaming, and then I started playing it again, and those were games that I was just playing because I enjoyed it, not to collect or anything like that. But over time, it kind of I got more games and just eventually filled one of these. These are two shelves stacked on top of each other. I had one of them and I was quite happy. I was like, wow, these are a lot of games, and I was enjoying it. But then it became a boom, and obviously, as you can see behind you, is a big bunch of games. But I want to say I started off not spending a lot of money, and honestly, I didn't spend much money, but I got great games. Now, one thing I will say that you kind of have to invest in with what I'm about to suggest for you guys is time. And time is one of those things where people are like, oh, you gotta count that as the cost. But I see it differently. Whenever I go out and hunt for a game, that's a different facet of collecting. That is a lot of fun. Like, you guys see my videos of where I'm out game hunting. Those aren't just to make videos or to just get games. They're because I enjoy it. Like, literally, I enjoy going out and potentially finding the best thing in the world or the crappiest thing, because you just never know. And I think that's what makes me kind of invested in game hunting a little bit. Not necessarily, that's not the whole reason, honestly, but finding the games in the wild is a big success, because when you find that one game that you see that you've been looking for months, and you find it for $25, $30, $40, or even like $5 off, you're like, there it is, I can finally buy this, I can finally play it and be happy. And so I'm gonna start off by saying, if you're gonna start a collection, start with cheap games. Start with those games that are under $10. There are a ton, I mean a ton of great games that are under $10, and you can find so much enjoyment under those games. And honestly, I think it just is worth it. When you're first starting out, you're on a budget. I'm assuming you don't have the most money in the world to spend, but you can get some really good games. A while back, I talked about the orange box on the PlayStation 3, which is about $10, but it has 4 different games on it, and it is one of the best compilation discs for the PlayStation 3 that I know of, at least. And there are other games like that maybe you'll find the game for $5 or $10 or maybe even $1. Finding cheap games and using those is a great way to grow your collection. But also, if you buy those cheap games and you flip them for $3 or $4 more, that's $3 or $4 more you can invest into your game collection. So say I have this DuckTales, which is just sitting here next to me because I want to play it soon. But say I have DuckTales and I paid $3 for it. But say it's worth $8, and maybe I'll play through it and then be like, okay, cool, I liked it, but maybe it wasn't my favorite game. Not talking bad about DuckTales, of course, here, but in the example, maybe I say it's worth $8. I could sell this for $8 and then have $8 and made $5 in order to put that more into my collection for maybe something that I'm looking for, like a Box 64 game or a Mario Kart 64 or whatever it is. If you are smart about that, by getting those cheap games and really making sure they're good and tested and reselling them, that is a good way to make your money. Now, when I say reselling them, don't jack up the prices. Go on price charting and see, okay, price charting says this is a $10 game, sell it for $8 or $9 and be happy because you paid $3 for it. I always say, give back to fellow gamers because that is what this is all about, is building community. So if you see that game worth $10 and you paid $3, sell it for $8, sell it for $9. Give that gamer a discount. You'll become friends. Maybe they'll give you some good deals in the future. It's all about building relationships. And I know the first one dragged on, but the first one is cheap games. But the second one is buy games that you're nostalgic for. Buy games that you will actually play. Because I see a ton of people, they'll go and get stacks and stacks and stacks of NES games or SNES games or PlayStation 2 games or whatever they're collecting for, but they never play it. Like, if I have 10 Xbox original games, I'm gonna play those because for some reason I'm obsessed with it right now. But if I find 5 generic SNES games, I may not pick them up at this point. I mean, I will pick them up if I don't have them in my collection and I will play them. But if it's just 5 random games that are priced too much or probably even like fair market price, I may pass on them because I just won't ever play them or whatever. But if it's a game I'm nostalgic for, like say I have a Blades of Steel on the NES, I'm gonna pick that up. When I start building my collection, I'm gonna think back to those games that I played as a kid that I absolutely loved. You're talking Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3. Those are all cheapish games. They're all under $20 for just the loose cartridge. And I'm gonna think about those games. I'm gonna think of maybe like a Yoshi game, maybe Zelda, of course Blades of Steel, and stuff like that. Come up with games that you love, that you know that no matter what, if you buy these games, you're gonna play them and have a lot of fun. Even if you have actually played them before, it definitely makes it well worth it to say, hey, I'm building this collection, here's 20 games that I have, but I've played every one of them because I enjoy them and I love them. Don't just go out and buy 15 versions of Fight Night Round 2. And yeah, I know this is a boxing game and it's Super Nintendo Punch-Out, but like I'm saying, don't buy a game that you're just not gonna play, and that's probably one I'm never gonna play. For some reason, I got the case for it and the disc was all scratched up, so I have it next here because I tried to resurface it and it didn't work. But like that, don't have a bunch of games that you're not gonna play if you're just starting out. If you find those games and they're cheap enough, like I said, flip them. But if they're not games that you're gonna play or that you're nostalgic for, I say pass on them and spend your money more wisely. Which leads me on to maybe the third and final option. Focus on a system. If you are checking out games from all these other systems and you're collecting Xbox games, you're collecting PS4 games, you're picking up PS2 games, NES games, SNES games, whatever they are, but you don't have the money for the consoles, it's kind of pointless. You're collecting a collection that you can't even enjoy to play. And so that's why I say focus on one system. Like for me, when I started collecting hardcore, it was the Nintendo 64, and I have about half of the 300 or so. I know it's like 296 or something like that. I have about half of them, but I'm not actively trying to get a full set. If I do, that'll be cool, but if not, I'm not missing out on some of those games. Just because they're rare doesn't make them worth it, honestly, unless I stumble upon them, obviously. But pick games that are on one specific console and say, I'm gonna play these, I'm gonna play this console, because then you're not spending as much money on games and extra consoles. So like if I was to start a video game collection today in 2019, there's probably 2 or 3 collections I would start. And these are kind of ideas of what consoles you should search for, but they're kind of great ones and can give you a big bang for your buck. And there are going to be 3 good ones. I'm going to start with some old ones all the way up to some newer ones that you'll probably be more familiar with. The first one is Atari 2600. You can get those things for like 30 to 40 bucks complete, like with all the cables and stuff to play on your TV. Now, you've got to be picky about it because they may not work on some of your TVs if they are HD TVs, but if they're CRT TVs like the one behind me, it'll work perfectly. And usually you can find those games for under $5, which is kind of cool. And I always like to say this: pick an Atari 2600 up and pick up 20 games. You're gonna be in maybe $100 and you will have a ton of fun. Now the graphics won't be great, the stories won't be great, but you'll still have fun and kind of grow your love for gaming, and also be learning about the past of gaming. So that's one I always like to suggest because it's so much cheaper. The next one I'm gonna say is the NES. And I know some people are gonna be like, oh, that's the NES, everyone knows about this. But here's gonna be my reason. You can pick up one for around 50 bucks or less, and the games are pretty cheap, and you can find those games like almost anywhere. Like anytime I go game hunting, honestly, if I go to a flea market or like a game store, I can find an NES game. Whether it's going to be good or not, that's a different story, but like I suggested, talked about DuckTales earlier, NES game, I want to say this is like a $10, maybe $15 game currently. I'm not quite sure, I've had it for a long time, but you can find a bunch of NES games for under $10, which is why I suggest it when you're starting a collection, because honestly, most of the games on the system are fun to play even if the graphics don't look that great. You can find a bunch of great games like that Super Mario, Super Mario 2, Super Mario 3. Those are all 3 great games, and those are really cheap games. So the NES is the second one that I recommend, and the third one that I recommend is the 3DS. And I'm going to specify the 3DS, not the 3DS XL or the new 3DS XL or the new 2DS XL. I'm going to say the 3DS. It's a small console, however, I have seen those regularly sell between $50 and $75, which is actually pretty good. And also, you can get the games for around $10 to $20. Now, I know there's outliers because new games come out, or really bad games, but the 3DS also supports DS, which means you've got an opening wide to more games. That just makes the amount of games you can pick a lot more, and you're only paying for one console. So those are the 3 games, and realistically, the 3 suggestions I have whenever you decide to build a game collection, because it can be hard, it can be daunting, but if you stick to these ideas, you can do really well, and over time, you can someday amass a collection this big. So with that being said, if you like this video, go ahead and comment down below and tell me what collection you are starting and what console it is for. So I want to say thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell notification because it lets you know when I post more videos. But make sure you have a good day.